Jay, thank you so much for joining me on the Life channel today. It's wonderful to meet you.
Same here, Sharon. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you.
Great stuff. And I'm very curious to learn more about your life, Jay, and your experiences. So, have you always valued work or thought work was very important in your life? Or
You have present tense and you have past tense. So when you're working in a specific job or position, sometimes you may think at the time it's a horrible place to work. There's a lot of negativity to it. But as you look back, it becomes very instrumental in your path. You pick up some things, whether it was a bad place to work or a good place to work. And as you move forward, the key is retaining the lessons learned in those positions
right.
and apply those throughout your life. So that's what I've done. So as we age, or I have aged, I kind of forget the bad things and only remember the good things. So I have no negative thoughts about everything that I've went through, even though they weren't all positive, because they were learning lessons.
Right, right. Very good. And I know that you were a veteran at one stage, and you've worked then in general industries, whatever you're willing to share. But are the roles that you did things that you fell into, or something that you pursued? It was what you wanted.
So, I started working at age 12. I came from the woods. I was a quote unquote redneck. I grew up on a horse farm, so I earned a living at age 12 baling hay and straw. I worked as a busboy at a little German restaurant in Holland, Indiana. Once I got into high school, I worked. I played football, but when I wasn't playing football, I worked sweeping up sawdust in a factory. I actually went to college. Now this is the ironic part. I went to college to play football, not to pursue an education.
Yeah.
So, I always wanted to go into law enforcement. And my first year of college, I realized that you actually had to go to class and maintain good grades.
Right.
And that wasn't my thing. I really just enjoyed playing football. But in life's journeys, I had someone who actually cared about me at college and said, Jay, this may not be your thing. What do you want to do? And I said, well, I want to be a police officer. He says, well, maybe change your major to sociology. And I considered that, but I also had a friend that had just joined the Army. He's like, hey, he said, talk to the recruiter. I'm like, all right. So that as soon as you say I'm going to talk to a recruiter, they are all over you.
Right.
So I spoke to the recruiter and he says, what do you want to do? And I said, I want to be a police officer. He said, we've got the perfect job for you. He said, a military policeman. I said, great. At the time I'd taken several years of German language in school. My family originally is from Germany, second or third generation. So I spoke German. Weeks before I was shipping off to Germany, my orders were rescinded. And they said, you're not going to Germany, you're going to Panama. So
Oh,
what's Panama? So here's a kid from the woods that spoke German, and they put me right in the middle of Central America. So that was the biggest blessing that ever happened to me. When I arrived in Panama, I was working as a military policeman. And after about a year, the U.S. Army has what's called the Criminal Investigation Division.
right.
They had asked for a referral from the military police unit. They said, who's the best MP you got there? And I didn't know it at the time. They said, this young guy, Jay Schurz. So they interviewed me and they brought me into the CID office, and I was put in charge of running the drug suppression team on the Atlantic side of Panama.
Wow.
So I was 22 years old and was responsible for some of the largest cocaine seizures in U.S. Army history at 22.
Wow.
I did that for a couple of years. I was involved in the U.S. invasion of Panama to oust General Manuel Noriega. They pulled me out of the field because I was working undercover. They had me investigating war crimes after the invasion. And then I was the law enforcement advisor to Colón, Panama. but I had to leave Panama after 4 years. So ended up going to Boston for a short time period. Then I went to Atlanta, and in Atlanta, I worked part-time as security for the Atlanta Braves. I loved that. Met Ted
Oh,
Turner. I actually stopped Ted Turner from going into one of his own places because I didn't know who he was.
wow.
But after that military stint, so I did 5 years of active duty and I did 7 years of National Guard in Indiana. I went to I was law enforcement, but a friend of the family who was a state representative in Indiana says, "Hey, we're starting a new prison in Indiana, and we need your help." I said, "Sure, I can do that." So I went to work at a prison and made lieutenant pretty quickly, but it was a high stress job, very
Right.
high stress. I was 28 years old, and my blood pressure was about 140 over 110 every day.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So my dad, who was a financial planner, said, "Jay, you're not going to live long." I said, "Well, I understand." He said, "Your health is going to be bad." And I had high blood pressure. I mean, it was not good.
Very young. Yeah.
Having family problems. I mean, it was just stress. I said, "Dad, what do I do?" He said, "Do what I do." I said, "Dad, I can't tell people what to do with their money." He's like, "You can tell a bad guy what to do with their gun, but you can't tell them what to do with their money." I said, "Pretty good point." So in 1996, one of the scariest things I ever did, because I was good at what I did in law enforcement. I'm very good. I changed careers and became a financial planner. So becoming a financial planner, I brought everything that I learned as a drug suppression investigator and a military policeman and all of my time at the Supermax prison. I carried those skills that I learned, which were communication skills. I actually taught deception detection, how to, when people are lying, you can tell their mannerisms. I was on the hostage extraction team for the state of Indiana. I knew what drove people,
Right.
but I carried that into my profession as a financial planner. And in 5 years, I became the #1 advisor with the seventh largest financial institution in the world. 27 years later, I'm still doing it. I own a
Right.
financial planning firm in Florida. But one thing about the military and combat and high stress things, that term PTSD doesn't show up when you're younger. It shows up when you're older.
Okay.
And I started to notice it, but I didn't know what it was. I didn't want to talk to people anymore. I was triggered by things. I was depressed. I didn't want to go out in public. And then, a friend of mine who was a retired police detective from New York said, "Jay," said, "you need to see the VA." He said, "You
Yeah.
got PTSD." I said, "No, I don't." He said, "I think you do, brother. I think you do." So I applied with the VA, and they were like, "Jay, you are a walking Netflix series." Seriously, they said, "We have never met anyone that has done what you've done." So towards the last 3 or 4 years, I've always been a world traveler. I enjoy being outside of the States. And I started working with expats. Community is a relatively new thing, even though people have always moved overseas. It has really taken off because of the things that are going on in the States. I mean, there's a lot of polarization. There's no middle ground anymore. Um, so I started working with expats, and I got
Right.
really good. I taught myself all the tax laws and immigration laws of Latin America.
Are you helping those expats in terms of retirement?
Philosophy is, you know, you'll have a lot of businesses that are in the expat community, such as relocation firms, that will only tell you the good things. I'm educating people on both spectrums. Yes, you may like Panama because the temperature, the climate, the low crime, the people here have a high moral compass. But there's still some bad things. Panamanians like to protest. They may shut down a road for 3 weeks.
You're sort of semi-retired or
So, I'm also a pastor. So that's another story. But I have a belief system that if I was given the talent of communication, my ability to communicate, I should always use that talent. So I have no forethought or plans to ever retire.
Okay.
I will do what I do as long as I can do it.
Brilliant.
Um, and I've been
Brilliant.
blessed, financially. I'm fine. The only thing that can hurt me is my voice. If I lose my voice, or lose my, as we age, sometimes we lose our memory.
Yeah.
I want
Yeah.
to do as much as I can now and help as many expats as I can. And the expat community is growing because of the things that are going on in the States, the higher cost of living, all those
Yeah.
things, and social media.
Yeah.
People have an opportunity to educate themselves now, and that's my channel. That's how I educate.
Right. So thank you for your service. A great story in
You're
all that
welcome.
you've done. And I think your flexibility to adapt is amazing. So based on that, that's great life experience. One of our questions is, do you have any advice on how people can be happy?
So that's a loaded question, but it's a great question. So one of the things that concerns me is people have this thought that they're going to live forever. They don't really ever think about end of life planning. They don't think about mortality being 100%. So they wait, and they
Right.
wait too long sometimes. So, if we start looking at an age group of age 60, for example, God willing, you have a window where your health is still relatively good, that you can enjoy with your friend or your spouse or even a solo to travel. I'm not saying you have to move to Panama, but if you want to get out and see the world, do it while you can. You may be
Yeah.
an empty nester now. I'm not saying people should leave when they have kids in the home, but if you get to the point where you can financially survive outside of the United States, don't wait until you're 70. Don't wait until
Yeah.
you're 75, because it's my opinion, but it's based on experience. There is a lifespan of being an expat, um, and it's because of health. People don't. And I asked this question several times today. What happens if you have dementia or Alzheimer's and you have residency in Panama? What do you do? There's no nursing homes here, very few, because the
Yeah.
family still takes care of the family here. Well, the reality is, at some point, you're probably going to have to go back to the States, possibly have Medicaid assistance to live in an assisted living facility or a full-time nursing home. So don't wait until you're possibly
Yeah.
2 or 3 years away from that.
Yeah.
Do it
Great advice.
now. Do it
Yeah.
now.
Yeah, I really agree with you on that. That's really great advice. Over your span of life, Jay, have you observed any major technological changes that have really positively impacted you?
So my kids would better answer that question, because I talk to them frequently about it. The cell phone. So you and I both, we went through a period of time where the phone was on the wall at home. And then
Yeah.
we had a long cord, and then we had a remote phone in the house that we could carry from room to room. Then we had a pager. And then, 15 years ago, Motorola came out with a phone. So the cell phone has completely changed everything. In my opinion of the cell phone is this: it can be used one of two ways. It can be used as a tool, or it could be used as something bad, just like a hammer. A hammer
Right.
can build a house, or you can use a hammer in the process of a crime. So if you use a cell phone responsibly and not use it as a way to babysit your children, or use it as a way to look at things you shouldn't be looking at, then I think it's a great thing. Ultimately, it has caused the population of the world to lose their ability to communicate. And I challenge you to go to any airport and just look. From ages 3 to 93, everyone is not talking. They're looking at their
Yeah.
cell phone. So I intentionally, when I go to the street now, unless I'm using Uber, I don't take my phone intentionally. And I have met more friends because I generate conversation with
Great.
people. So it's good and bad.
The last question then, Jay, if you were looking back to your younger self in your 20s, Is there any advice you'd give yourself?
If I could talk to my younger self, the common premise is you would tell yourself, save more money, those kind of things. But the reality is, I think sometimes our identity is defined, or we think our identity is defined by the number of friends we have, the number of followers we have on social media, and that is not true. That is not your identity. And I would tell myself to keep a very small circle. Sometimes you have to push people outside of your circle. Doesn't mean you don't love them, doesn't mean you don't care for them, but if they're not lifting you up, they're tearing you down. So the person that I could call at 2 o'clock in the morning and say, I need your help. And they would the only thing they would do is grab a shovel because they know we need to help bury a body. I mean, I'm joking, but it to prove a point. So I literally have maybe 2 people that I consider very close friends. Of course, my children and my grandchildren are in that circle, but sometimes family members, cousins, sometimes parents, siblings, co-workers, different people. Keep them at arm's reach, but don't bring them into your circle if they're not adding value to your life. I wish I could have told myself that when I was 20, because I let people in that caused harm simply because I thought the more friends that I had, the better off I was, and that is not true.
Interesting. Yeah, I think that's a great point because you really are influenced by the energy of the people around you.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
Brilliant, Jay. It's been a fantastic interview. I mean, we could talk for ages, but it is a short format. But thank you so much. Incredible life you've lived so far. And I hope life in Panama continues to be really, really good for you.
Well, thank you so much. I enjoyed my time speaking with you.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
I hope you enjoyed the video on the Life channel. Please subscribe, and if you're interested in participating, just click the link in the description below. Thank you.